So look, sit back, relax. Today we'll have a very good conversation about blockchains, the battle between blockchains. So obviously no fight, just, highlighting some particular advantages and so on and so forth. Welcome, I'm saying welcome to our audience. Thanks very much for watching us today. Today we have very special panelists who actually joined this conversation. I'm super excited to handle this conversation, to moderate the panel. Today's panel is again dedicated to finding out who is the fairest of all the blockchains. So we'll try to solve this quite sophisticated problem. So let me firstly introduce myself, and then I give it over to my colleagues. They will introduce themselves. So I'm Alex Melikhov, the CEO and the founder with the Equilibrium team. We are building the DeFi super app on Polkadot, which is comprising a lot of functionality and actually leveraging the cross-chain interoperability. So we're advocating for all blockchains connected with each other without, differentiating them one from each other, and actually looking forward to the whole blockchain space working as a whole one. Without further ado, let me give it over to my colleagues. Alon, why don't you go first to introduce yourself?
Sure. So first of all, happy to be here. I think it's a great conversation. I'm Alon. I'm the CEO of block staking and ssv.network. What we develop is started out as a staking service, but today we develop the centralized staking infrastructure network based on secret shared validator, the ssv technology. What it basically means is that we're building kind of a layer 0 for Ethereum and maybe potentially other blockchains down the road for the centralized staking infrastructure that is distributing the operations of an Ethereum validator. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here, happy to discuss what's happening in the space and kind of to give my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Sami.
Yeah, great to be here as well. So my name is Sami. I work for Binance and supporting ecosystem development for Binance Smart Chain. So basically, we're focused on supporting the developer community, developing innovative projects across a number of different domains in the DeFi space, gaming space, and a number of others. So we're supporting, we're already a multi-chain ecosystem. So we support currently 2 chains, which is Binance Chain, the Tendermint-based chain, which we launched in 2019, which runs Binance Dex. And then more recently, last year, September, we launched BSC, which is an EVM-compatible chain, which probably more users are familiar with. But we're generally a big advocates for multi-chain, and we see kind of multi-chain futures coming more a multi-chain reality. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks very much for these comprehensive intros. Let's maybe make a transition to the first topic of our today's discussion. It's actually around the congestions on Ethereum, and we all know that despite high network fees, some scalability issues, and so on and so forth, Ethereum actively is growing in terms of its transaction activity, and still have a lot of applications which are just newcomers to the space. So given all these kind of things, first of all, maybe you give your perspective on how your technologies will improve this whole situation, how they will affect the Ethereum adoption, whether you consider the blockchain networks that you're working on as Ethereum killers, or somehow competing with Ethereum in terms of its domination on the market. Why don't we start with Sami?
Yeah, sure. So this is a very interesting question and topic. So I think generally I don't really agree too much with the Ethereum killer narrative, because I think we're such an early stage in terms of where crypto adoption is and where generally we want it to be, that there will be potentially multiple base layers. So Ethereum is a maximally decentralized network, which has by far the largest developer adoption, and is where most of the new innovations is being deployed and housed. But if we look at DeFi, for example, so DeFi had a number of objectives and ideals to become like provide alternative financial services, which is disintermediated, equally accessible. But eventually, due to various factors, especially network congestion, we saw a number of periods of time over the last 18 months plus where transaction fees have become quite prohibitive for different types of users. So I think especially users which have smaller on-chain net asset values find it difficult to participate meaningfully if transaction fees are $50, $100+ so from that perspective, I think what happened over the last year with several EVM chains, layer 2s, and others like BSC, Avalanche, Phantom, Polygon, and a number of other, like the most notable ones, kind of acted like a relief from a pressure cooker, but also in a way helped in a lot to accelerate new user adoption. So we saw over the last year was a really notable year for crypto adoption. We had all-time high on so many different metrics, not only about like asset prices, but new users coming into crypto that were due to the emerging DeFi ecosystems on BSC and Polygon and others, able to have their first experiences on DeFi, start learning, and participate in a more meaningful way. And I think we're also seeing more developments happening in non-EVM chains as well. So for sure, Solana, for example, is having very significant developer adoption and user growth. So I think overall, it's not so much like zero-sum situation where you have multiple base layers that will be able to really accommodate the current growth of crypto adoption, which is, I think, what the ultimate objective for most players in the ecosystem should really be about.
Got it. I'm curious, like just from practical perspective, like you mentioned that like all these layer 2 solutions and faster and cheaper blockchains are actually facilitating the blockchain adoption. I'm curious whether we have some metrics around BSC in terms of like newcomers who actually made the transition between Ethereum and BSC and stuff. Like it would be very interesting if you could cover these numbers.
Yeah, so we have a lot of data points that we see through on-chain data and other data sources as well. For example, through Binance Bridge, which is one of the most used ways for users to bridge assets between not only to BSC but many other ecosystems. So Binance the exchange, and Binance Bridge acts as a bridge across so many different ecosystems, many blockchains the number will continue to grow over time. But we have seen, so today, for example, if you look at PancakeSwap, it has the largest number of users among any DeFi application. And it's only second among all dApps behind Axie Infinity. So for sure, that's really been one of like a clear indicator about accessibility or more equal access for all types of users and all groups of users. And I think that's a really key point here as well. It's really about having choice, not only for users, but also for developers, right? So developers, today we have networks that have different network architectures. Each of them have kind of different trade-offs or different trust assumptions, but ultimately it's about choice. And it's also about for developers being able to test market demand. And ultimately the market decides through product market fit, user traction, which types of networks are suitable for different types of use cases. Does every use case really need to be on maximally decentralized networks? Probably not, and user adoption also indicates the same thing. For example, in gaming, probably doesn't need to be on a maximally decentralized networks where you're also going to have to pay a kind of premium on transaction fees for that maximal decentralization. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of interesting developments happening from a data perspective that really indicates several things. One, user adoption is growing, which is fantastic, and I think these types of infrastructures really are the key enabler in driving that acceleration of user adoption. But the other thing is also users are becoming increasingly aware about what different network architectures mean from a decentralization and security perspective, and are making their choices, and that can be seen based on various data metrics like unique active addresses, growth, transaction volume, total value locked, and many others. I don't think there's one particular data point. I think you need to consider all of them to get a really good picture of what the situation is really about.
Awesome. Thanks very much for this perspective. And actually, we'll touch on decentralization a little bit later in the course of the conversation as well. Let's make transition to Alon. Alon, do you consider yourself as a Ethereum killer?
Oh, so
we are
a network for Ethereum. We're not competing with Ethereum. We are for Ethereum, kind of a layer 0 for Ethereum. But I think in terms of what Sammy said, I agree with a lot of the points. I think that the conversation around Ethereum competitors really changed from 2017 to today. So 2017 was all about killing Ethereum, and I think it put a lot of people, especially developers, in kind of a maxi kind of approach to Ethereum, because they said, you know what, you're not going to kill Ethereum, so it's kind of like Bitcoin maximalists. We got to be Ethereum maximalists in that respect. But I think once the conversation actually changed to, you know what, that's not going to kill Ethereum, but there are a few solutions to a different set of problems, I think it got a lot of people's attention. I do believe that there's two conversations to have. One is, what are the different solutions, and we need to be true and transparent about what they do, and not try to kind of attach to them properties they don't have. And two is really talk about decentralization and how to scale without trade-offs in terms of decentralization. I think that those are two different conversations. I'm definitely okay with the conversation saying, you know what, some applications, or beforehand, a developer saying, you know what, for this application, I rather have less decentralizations and more TPS. I'm fine with that. If that's the kind of in a transparent conversation, that's totally fine. Engineering is always a trade-off between different things. But I think that as long as we're talking about that, that's fine. When we're trying to cross into an Ethereum killer mindset, I think that's where I'm kind of blocking away the conversation, because I think that Ethereum is really the only one, or maybe the few of the really kind of hardcore community-driven development that try to focus on scale without sacrificing decentralization. I think that's very, very important. I think first of all, it kind of puts a lot of new technologies in other blockchains and other solutions, and that's always great. But also it spearheads real scale for decentralization. So I think both of those things can dream and happen. I do think Ethereum will have 80-90% of the market. I do think that's where we're seeing things. Or I should rather say Ethereum and all Ethereum extensions, which are L2s, right? I mean, as long as the base value is on Ethereum, as long as the commitment at the end of the day comes to Ethereum. So I do think that will be a very large portion of the market. But it did change my mind during while the conversation changed to, instead of trying to kill Ethereum, to transparently saying, that's a different solution. I definitely think that people want other solutions, other blockchains that give higher TPS and are less picky about decentralization. I think that's fine, and we're seeing user adoption. By the way, I think that's why we're seeing user adoption of those solutions, rather than what we saw, for example, with EOS. I think that once you communicate clearly what you're all about, and people make those choices according to what you said, and that's the truth, I think people are much more convenient, comfortable with working on those blockchains. I think that the approach is very, very important. And so from my point of view, plurality of blockchains is great. I've heard a terminology calling additional layer, execution layer blockchains as kind of a L1.5, kind of something in between L1, which is Ethereum in this case, and maybe other blockchains which are still execution layers. But a lot of the value they get is from different bridges from Ethereum to those blockchains and back again. And so I'm very excited to see that. I think that if we can manage to get those communities also working on common technology, I think that would be really, really cool. So for example, bridges are very rudimentary today. I think there's a lot of things we can do with bridges to make them much more safe and secure and decentralized. And so, for example, that's, I think, a great part where communities can come together and work on solutions which are Ethereum and another blockchain. We might even see non-Ethereum bridges between other blockchains taking shape and getting subtraction. That would be interesting as well. Yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. I think that's fine, as long as we're true to what different solutions mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we've definitely seen all these Ethereum killers in action, and definitely no one actually took over the leadership of Ethereum. Definitely, we personally have experience in building on EOS, and actually EOS didn't make it to be the Ethereum killer eventually, because when you're stating something of this kind, you need to eventually to prove your kind of feasibility, right? So you need to prove the feasibility of your technology and so on and so forth. So definitely, it's better not to kind of kill Ethereum, but maybe to complement Ethereum this way. So let's maybe have a bird view on the current situation on the layer, whatever, 1. So everyone is putting different numbers up to letter L right now, right? Somebody L0, somebody L1, L2, and so on and so forth. So from your perspective, like if we take the whole landscape of the current blockchain ecosystems, like taking BSC, like others, Cardano, Avalanche, and others, like from your perspective, is there a chance that some of this ecosystem, or even like Polkadot, whatever, will take over the leadership of Ethereum in terms of the volume of transactions or volume of liquidity? Like, what's your takes of that? Who wants to take that first?
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
Go ahead, Alon.
Go ahead.
That's because I think those are two different value propositions. I mean, I think as long as you have a common thread about what decentralization is, everyone will get to the same issue. If you are compromising around decentralization for TPS, then you're not killing Ethereum. You're simply doing something different and actually moving towards centralized services. And so I think, again, I think the conversation shouldn't be who is going to kill Ethereum. I think it's done. It's a done deal. And Ethereum can kill itself. Nobody can ever kill Ethereum. So Ethereum can implode, but I don't think outside blockchains can kill it at the moment. And by implode, I just mean Ethereum stop innovating or whatever. The entire leadership of Ethereum moves to other blockchains, and so. From my point of view, it's a done deal. I think it's a waste of energy to think about killing Ethereum. I think it's just a better way to just try to build the best service you can and try to build the best blockchain you can. Be true to what it means and what it does, and you'll get traction. I think there's so much going on in the market. Thinking about killing your competitors is I think it's a waste of time because you'll be focused on the wrong thing. Think about bringing new people in. I mean, there's so much innovation happening, so much different services, so many people signing in for crypto in general. Yeah.
Sami?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question because for several points I wanted to share here. So I think right now it's very clear that there's a very large lead that Ethereum ecosystem has in terms of developer adoption. And I'll make a small distinction here as well, because if we've seen what's happened over the last year, we've seen EVM chains that have achieved significant traction. But the large majority of them, or at least the ones that so far to date that have gained significant traction, like BSC, Polygon, Avalanche, and Phantom, don't necessarily inherit any security from Ethereum mainnet today. They're EVM compatible, essentially Geth forks that have their own security either through proof of stake, and they all have different kind of network architectures, but ultimately none of them inherit any security properties from Ethereum mainnet today. They are EVM compatible, which means it's easy for the current and very large Ethereum developer ecosystem to be able to build there, but the real L2s like Arbitrum and Optimism are just getting started. Definitely, I expect that they will have significant traction and adoption, but it is still in the early days there. But if you look at others, the non-EVM or others potential, I wouldn't call them EVM killers. I would say competitors that may take equal or like a more advantageous position in terms of user adoption, in terms of developer community size, or on other metrics, are networks like Solana, for example. Also, Polkadot ecosystem is still in the early days, but it's emerging and has a very large and well equipped ecosystem to achieve significant user adoption. So I think also on this point, it may be important to consider that what is really crypto adoption and these types of systems networks try to achieve. Basically, in my perspective, trying to provide a new type of network architecture that can facilitate reconstructing some of the inefficient industries, economies, different systems that like kind of operate the planet, right? But does everything need to settle? All of those systems and economies need to and industries settle on one base layer? Isn't that a point of centralization and also a fairly significant risk? So I think that ultimately there will be several base layers. EVM, Ethereum mainnet, and others will form that kind of network of base layers on top of which all of these applications and industries will be built on top of. In terms of whether Ethereum is going to lose, I think that's also, I agree a little bit here on what Alon said. It's really, it's theirs to lose, because right now there's a very ambitious roadmap that they need to deliver, and technically challenging one as well. But for sure, other ecosystems are not going to wait around in order for them to like kind of figure out these challenges. So it is in some ways competitive, but I don't think necessarily zero sum. I think there is opportunity that in case things don't go well or there's significant delays, that other ecosystems could very well catch up and maybe move ahead in terms of developer size, number of users, or other metrics. But important to mention here, I think that doesn't kind of remove any kind of value away from the Ethereum ecosystem, but definitely lets others in.
I actually don't see anyone who's trying to develop or solve the same challenges as Ethereum tries to solve. I think that most of the other EVM chains, let's put it that way, simply made a big trade-off in terms of TPS versus decentralization. And again, that's fine as long as you frame it in that way. And I do agree, not all applications need the security level of Ethereum. That's fine. But I don't think they're working on the same challenges. Ethereum is very focused on solving scale without compromising on decentralization. I think most of the others kind of made their peace with more decentralized or less decentralized framework or protocol. And so yeah, I mean, and I would also separate between L2s like Polygon or Optimism and so on, which do derive their security from Ethereum. I mean, their own protocol can still be faulty, but they do base their security on Ethereum. And other blockchains which are completely different. Might be compatible in terms of EVM, but that's little to no effect in terms of security. I mean, you could be very EVM compatible, but have a completely different consensus protocol. And so yeah, I think they're just addressing different challenges. I don't see any other blockchain trying to address the challenges Ethereum is trying to address, or at least not to that degree. But again, it's not to say that those shouldn't exist. I think they should exist. Just be true to what you're developing. Yeah.
Okay. So look, just a quick remark here. So you both mentioned that like EVM chains, they're built in different ways, but they're getting adoption and stuff. So what's your perspective on that? Does the chain, which is kind of expecting to become the leader in the space, need to be EVM compatible at the end of the day, or the EVM compatibility is not the guarantee for a particular chain to get adoption, get developers and traction?
I think here the question is this, or the answer is somewhere in between, because it's neither yes nor no. Because today, by far, the largest community of developers are in the Ethereum ecosystem. They're familiar with Solidity, has the most robust and comprehensive developer tooling infrastructure. So for project teams today that want to launch a product fast and start achieving user traction, I think there's quite a lot of attraction to do it on an EVM chain. It's quite challenging to do it on a non-EVM chain. So if you look at, for sure, I think today among non-EVM chains, Solana is by far has the highest level of adoption. And easy to audit that in many different ways, like on-chain data, like a number of ways. There, I think today, like the project teams that are looking at developing on Solana understand well the challenges of finding really good Rust developers, not only finding them, but keeping them. It's challenging. So I think Solana's approach was interesting and different because they were not trying to capture and convert or attract developers from the current Ethereum developer ecosystem, which if you look at as a representation of the global developer, not just crypto, but developer ecosystem, is actually very tiny still. So they're bringing in net new developers. They said, understand well the limitations around EVM and Solidity. Our network architecture and design decisions are different and have different benefits and trade-offs. But we're going to attract net new developers. And it is working. Definitely it's going to have some kind of ramp up and learning curve there. But the data also shows that they're kind of executing very well there. So it's kind of different approaches here. But ultimately, I think it also comes down to the fact that today the whole ecosystem is still small. So if we're talking about total number of crypto users, I estimate probably we're somewhere like 120, maybe 150 million. I might be quite off wrong, but like this is kind of where I expect it to be. But it's still really, really small. So if instead of trying to like have these kind of chain wars or compete for the same set of developers or try to compete for projects, and it's only competition because there's not enough developers. Instead, if we're like focused on bringing new developers, accelerating developer education, developer adoption, that grows the whole pie much more orders of magnitude for everyone. So I think that's kind of the focus, at least for us. Even from an infrastructure perspective, I think for us, we're really aimed at providing infrastructure for wherever there's developer demand. Today, that's EVM. Tomorrow, it could be something else. But ultimately, we will want to provide the infrastructure for developers, whatever the technology, programming language, whatever it is that they want to use. Our objective is to provide that.
I don't think if somebody or some blockchain will kill Ethereum, I don't think it should be EVM. I mean, EVM at the end of the day just stands for a set of instructions, which 5-6 years ago Ethereum made up from scratch, right? I mean, you could do any other virtual machine running on anywhere. Actually, I think that. I mean, EVM is great. Maybe Ethereum will go and do other stuff. Maybe, I don't know. But EVM itself is less of a challenge. The bigger challenge is really the consensus protocol. The EVM itself, it could be EVM. It could be completely different. You could also create interpreters for Solidity to other languages, other set of instructions. I mean, it's like saying that, Intel x86 is the only CPU in the world, right? I mean, and of course we know it's not to be the case. So EVM is comparable to the CPU. You'll have different set of instructions, different CPUs, different virtual machines running. I don't think it's a holdback to anything.
Cool. I will ask the question which somehow overlaps with what actually our listeners are bringing up in the chat. From your perspective, like what's the most interesting smart contract technologies that you have run into in just recently, and actually which caught your attention, and maybe you also can highlight some of them who are the most accessible and most likely will be widely adopted in this world, in the world overall.
From my end, it's really all of the L2 stuff. I think that's incredible. I think that it's not only L2, it's also different L2 solutions interoperability. Like that's going to be huge. I think that's very, very interesting. How you and we're starting to see that, right? I mean, Uniswap, for example, with V3 and so on, we're starting to see actually pretty amazing adoption for L2s. Like if you think about it, a company is or a project as big as Uniswap modifying their contracts to work on different L2s is quite a significant endeavor. So I definitely think it's going to be huge. And that's definitely interesting in terms of technology. In terms of user or let's say feature rich, I think that all of the different projects working on tokenized staking on Ethereum, that's going to revolutionize DeFi. I mean, most of the collateral on DeFi today is Ethereum. Just recently, MakerDAO, Ethereum went back again to be the biggest collateral instead of USDC. And so if you think about it, all of that ETH can be replaced with a tokenized version of staking ETH, which is kind of compounding your interest rate. So that's going to be very, very cool. So I definitely think that that's going to be a big revolution to the DeFi space as well.
Yeah, I actually support this point of view as well, because we've seen a lot of applications actually rolling out their layer 2 implementations recently, and definitely it will lead to more adoption, more user acquisition, more capacity, so on and so forth. Sammy, what do you think of what's your take on the current landscape of the smart contract platforms?
Yeah, I think at the moment is a super interesting time. Obviously, there's a lot of ecosystems emerging. Some are growing at a kind of faster speed than others, but others also, the ones that are still a bit earlier, are very promising. But I look at it from a perspective of kind of data-driven perspective, as well as where we really see developer teams building today. So there are, I won't name names, but there are smart contract platforms that have really amazing technology and potential, but ultimately almost no developer teams really building there today, or a very, very small number. Whereas if I look at some ecosystems like Solana, for example, and others outside of the EVM space, so just make it clear. So by far the leader is EVM, and to go in a little bit deeper there, so we see a lot of it, like most of the innovation today, especially in the DeFi space, is still happening on the Ethereum mainnet. So it starts there, and then it starts to kind of spread both to the L2 ecosystem and the other EVM chains as well. But besides so EVM is a clear leader there in terms of where the highest level of developer activity, where the most level of innovation is happening. Besides that, it's happening in a few other places. So I think in the Solana ecosystem, it is one of them. I think Polkadot also has a number of, maybe not as many, but very high quality, extremely capable teams that are building there in Kusama as well as in Polkadot.network. So I think these two are like ones that are notable to mention. There are other ones, but I think those are still in much earlier stages, where the level of developer adoption and the number of professional, highly capable teams is still quite small, or too small to really be talking about.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm a little bit advocating, for example, for Polkadot, despite the barrier for the entry is quite high. We got a lot of developers who are actually, have brilliant ideas and They are super qualified to build very sophisticated applications. And there are some other ecosystems that don't have that much adoption, unfortunately, despite the brilliant technology behind them. Well, okay. So look, why don't we pick some questions from our chat room and go through them. So here's the question for Sammy. Will BSC become a roll-up on Ethereum? Interesting one.
It's a very interesting question. So I think the answer to this is nothing is out of the question. So wherever there is developer demand, we will look to how we provide that. And what people see today, what the developer community and users see today is the current BSC chain is going to evolve over time. We will launch more chains. We will launch application or domain-specific chains, which could be more well-suited for gaming, for example. This could look like private shard chains. They could look like L2 solutions. They could look like WASM or non-EVM chains as well. So I think here we are our main focus and mission is about providing the core infrastructure that will facilitate acceleration of crypto adoption. So we're open to all kinds of ideas. We will look at providing the infrastructure wherever there is developer demand. So the answer to this question is possibly.
Announcement of the announcement. Okay, makes sense. Cool, thanks, Sammy. So Evelis is asking, would you have suggestions for the youngers and startups to get their projects off the ground, to structure their blockchain business in terms of getting the right partners, ventures, compliance, governance? And I would add to that to pick the right blockchain ecosystem.
Yeah, I can go on this one. So I think here for teams that are looking at launching projects or in the design stages, to pay attention to several factors. One is understand well what are your hypotheses, try and test them early with real users as much as possible, be able to iterate well, and then focus well on two areas that I encourage project teams in this kind of situation to really focus well on terms of execution and execution quality is the product development side. So ensure that you have a great developer culture inside your team that's focusing well on product prioritization, what you guys are trying to achieve. And then equally important is your user acquisition and growth. So you need both. You can, like teams that are a little bit weak in one or the other are going to have very significant challenges. So you want to give like equal attention and importance on both. You could build a really fantastic, like outstanding product, and then if you're weak on the user acquisition and traction side, it's going to be super challenging, and vice versa. You have to give like equal importance on both of these areas. That's just my 2 cents in this one.
Alon?
I think that it's kind of weird, but I think that try to push the envelope. That's the biggest advice I can give. I see a lot of people trying to create a project when the markets are high, and that's really much more challenging than when they're down, because the price of developers is much higher, the price of acquisition is much higher, everything is much higher. There's a saying in the blockchain space, you build in winter and harvest in the summer. So I think that's true, but I think that particularly is try to push the envelope. I see a lot of people coming and seeing, the hot new things like NFTs and Defi and so on, and try to basically iterate and do the same, which it's already existing. There's so much to do. Try to push the envelope. Try to do things which people didn't do. Try to do things which you don't see, because especially in the blockchain space, if you're seeing something which works and you're only trying to replicate it, you better be sure that there's at least 10 different other blockchains, projects doing the same exact thing. And they're bigger and faster than you. Just try to push the envelope. There's so much innovation that can happen. That's the biggest advice I can give.
Awesome. I think this is very helpful, by the way. Some advice, I'm taking the notes of them just for myself. So cool. And actually, maybe before we start wrapping up, I'll pick just the last one question from the chat. So Douglas is asking whether you guys have any suggestions for someone who is looking to make a career change into the blockchain, crypto, and DeFi space. By the way, I have one suggestion. So it's very good when someone changed his mind and moves from traditional kind of fields to blockchain. Usually you have very fresh vision of everything what's going on, specifically if you are very high professional at what you're doing right now. And by the way, we're also hiring at Equilibrium. Reach out to us. Maybe you guys also have some suggestions.
Yeah, we are hiring as well, but other than that, just make the decision, and the earlier you can make it, do it, because there's a saying, if you have a ticket on a rocket ship, don't ask which seat is yours. Just get on the rocket ship. It doesn't fail. Just choose blockchain every single time. It's a growing economy and a growing ecosystem. And it doesn't really matter what your position is. You can be a lawyer, you can be an economist, you can be a developer, you can be a product guy. It doesn't really matter. The tools you gain today in this line of work is incredibly valuable, and there's actually the pace of innovation and the pace of acceleration is much higher than the pace of people getting into the different positions. That's why salaries for almost across the board are skyrocketing. There's not enough people doing blockchain. There's much more people getting in as users and not enough as innovators or people doing stuff. So just get on the train, do that. It doesn't really matter which position. Just do a good job, and you'll get rewarded, I think.
Sammy, do you have anything to add?
I think Alon covered it really, really well. I think the only points I would add on top is definitely go ahead and do it, but also spend the time on like Twitter, get involved in communities that you're excited about on Discord, because there's crypto never sleeps. There's always things like you're learning every day. I think everybody, regardless of how long they've been in crypto, is kind of learning. The pace of innovation is just insane. So, be active in the communities, get involved, and best of luck to you.
Awesome. So let's start wrapping up our amazing conversation. I personally enjoyed it very much. At the end of the day, will there be a battle of blockchains? Will the winner take it all, or there will be like the friendship, the sort of balance, harmony, and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think the battle is not between us. I think the battle is between everyone who's working in the blockchain space to get adoption from anyone who's not in the blockchain space. That's the bigger challenge, I think.
I definitely agree here. I think like the main battle should be collective battle for driving crypto adoption. Although definitely the road there will have kind of like a journey where communities are conflicting at times, and then ultimately narratives change, perspectives change. There could be times of conflict, but I think ultimately we need to keep stay aligned on what the real end objective is, which is really bringing crypto to everyone and accelerating crypto adoption. That's my perspective on that.
Amazing. I think we're running out of time. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining this panel today. I was really excited to host you here.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thank you so much, man. And to Alon and Sammy, guys, this was a fantastic battle. But by name alone, really, because actually it was a fantastic education for everyone in terms of just unfolding how important crypto is in Web3, So, gents, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. It's such a privilege to have you on a South African stage, and we look forward to hosting you in real person, hopefully, when things open up in the future.
Looking forward to that.
Looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.